Welcome. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. And we are getting to the turning point of the story of Joseph. Of course, there may be a few turning points, but the point is that the one that's going to flip everything and going to resolve the terrible, terrible thing that had happened 30 years before that, when the brothers were ready to kill their brother and wound up selling him into slavery. And this perhaps is, we're moving towards perhaps one of the most moving and magnificent points of the story, and perhaps the greatest uh, expression of an answer to the question that started at the beginning of Genesis of Cain and Abel. And of course, I think the point that the Torah is making is that when human beings are enemies with each other, it's actually fratricide when they're killing someone else. That we are actually all brothers and sisters, but we're family, and it's terrible. So, but one has to learn these things, I guess. It isn't just, and of course, the fact that we have to learn these things, there lies greatness. The fact that it isn't just put into us. So, what happened was the last we left off the story where the brothers have visited Joseph a second time, and he's treated them in a very interesting and kind of way and treated them personally. And then they're on their way back, and of course he asked his head person to put his silver cup into Benjamin's sack, and then the brothers are on their way. That is along with the money, and they're just outside of the city, and they are pursued by this man, and he's met them, and he's accusing them, and they are denying it. They're denying it. So he says, well, let's check it out, right? Vayimaharu vayoridu ish et amtachto arza. And they hastened, and they took down, each man took his sack and took it down onto the ground, put it down onto the ground. So Rashi will tell us why this particular detail. Vayiftechu ish amtachto, and each man opened up his sack. So let's see. I'm pretty sure that there was a Rashi. Okay. Somewhere I saw a comment. Okay. That the fact that each person didn't need any assistance from anyone else, and maybe that's coming up in the next verse, right? Vaychapes begadol hechel, and he searched, and he began with the oldest, uvakaton kila, and he ended with the youngest, vayimatzeh hagviyah, and the chalice was found, ba'abtachat Binyamin, in Benjamin's chalice. And of course, remember, the brothers have already said that in whoever's sack the chalice is found, because they're so convinced it's not going to be there, that person will die, and the rest of them will become slaves. And immediately they were told, no, just the person who's guilty of this. So what Joseph, of course, is doing to underline this is he's making it very easy for the brothers to get rid of Benjamin. That if that hatred still exists, if they don't regret their past behavior, they're going to have an easy opportunity to do it a second time. So, okay, Begadol Hechel. He began with the oldest. Why? This is so clever. Shelo yargishu, that they shouldn't sense shehaya yodea hechanu, that he already knew where it was. And of course, he did know already where it was. But the point of this sentence is that they shouldn't be suspicious that he already knew. Important. Vayikra'u simlotam. They tore their robes. Vayamos ish al chamora. This must be it, right? This is the difficult part, right? And each man loaded up his donkey, vayashuvu ha'ira, and they returned to the town. So here we go. This is where it was going to be. Vayamos make sure I'm reading this correctly. Sorry. Yeah, Vaya Amos. Vaya Amos ish al chamoro, right? Ba'alei zroa hayu. They were strong people. They were muscle men. V'lo hutzrechu l'sayaya ze et ze. And they didn't need to help each other. Lit'on, to load up the camel. Obviously, loading the sacks is a lot harder than taking the sacks off the donkey. So this is why this mentions it in verse 12. So there's an underlying point here about how strong these guys were. They were really powerful. Remember, we already have the story of Shechem, where just two of the brothers go and do stuff that's just terrible. And so we are told here that they were really powerful people. We're going to be told more. Vayashuvu ha'ira, and they returned to the town. And here's the point. Metropolin haita. It was a metropolis, a metropolis, right? Polis, just a town, metro, right? Just a bunch of towns together, huge. Vahu omer, and this says, and the scripture is just saying, ha'ira, they just went to the town. Ha'ir kol any town. Ela shelo haita chashuva be'enehem, but the way the brothers looked at this town, right? Ela ke'ir beinoni, they just saw it as just a small town. Shel asara bnei adam, 10 families living in it. Le'inyan hamilchama, if they were to take it on, right? Regarding battle. So I think there's a point here, a really big point, that had the brothers wanted to actually take on Joseph at that time, they could have easily killed him. They would have been quite possibly successful in their warfare, and the text has already set that up for us. But that's going to contrast, recognizing just how they could have resolved this whole thing through warfare, and they don't, is a big point. So it's in the story. Okay. Amazing. Vayavo Yehuda ve'echav, and this is important, right? And Judah and his brothers. The fact that Judah is singled out is because he is the preeminent brother. Remember, he's the brother that convinced the other brothers not to kill Joseph, but to sell him into slavery. And so he is the preeminent individual. We also remember that story of Judah and Tamar. And what the Torah is doing here is foreshadowing the ultimate point where Judah is going to be the progenitor of King David, right? And Joseph is also going to represent the northern kingdom. When those kingdoms split, there's the tribe of Judah and Benjamin, and that's significant, and also the 10 northern tribes that follow Joseph, because Ephraim, right, is the son of Joseph, who eventually becomes a tribe by himself. And so this foreshadowing is happening right here, which is going to explain to us why Benjamin, who at least through genealogy would have gone with Ephraim, doesn't and goes with Judah. And this is going to be the key element that's going to happen. And the Torah is already sort of building up to that. So here we go. So Judah and his brothers, Beta Yosef, they came into the house of Joseph, Vahu Odenu Sham, and he was still there. Vayiplu lifanav arza, and they fell before him on the ground. They prostrated themselves on the ground. So here already, right? As opposed to taking him on, they totally humbled themselves before him. Right. So
like in his dream.
Yes, exactly. Oh, yeah. He remembered that before because when they first came to visit him, they likewise, out of respect, bowed before him because of his position. Odenu Sham. So why does the Torah mention that he was still there? Shaya Mamtin Lahim, because he was waiting for them. He purposely stayed. He knew they would be back. Vayomer Lahim Yosef. So Joseph said to them, Maham aseh hazeh asher asitem. What is this act, this deed that you performed? What did you do? Halo yadatem, didn't you know? Ki nachesh Ish asher kamoni? Didn't you already know that someone like myself is capable of divination? Okay, but lenachesh can also, it means beyond that too. So this asher kamoni, someone like myself. Rashi, let's go into this. All right, let's take a look. Halo yidatem kinachesh yinachesh, right? Didn't you know that someone like me would figure out what happened, etc. Halo yidatem, didn't you already know ki ish chashuv kamoni, that someone prominent like myself, yodea lenachesh veladat midat, not only knows how to, so lenachesh can also mean to suspect. But let's leave it with divination here. Veladat midat, and also to know rationally, right? To be able to figure it out. Umisvara, and again, this has to do with logical deduction. Uvena or uvina, and understanding. Excuse me, and with understanding. Ki atem, that you ganavtem hagvia, that you stole the cup. You should have known. I'd figure it out. I'd figure out you stole the cup. You weren't going to get away with it. Of course, right? He hadn't stolen the cup, right? They hadn't. But what are they going to say to him? What are they going to say to him? This is intentional. Joseph has figured this out, right? Okay. Vayome Yehuda, look at this. And Judah, right? He becomes the spokesperson. Manu Mar Ladoni, and look at his language. What can we say to my Lord? Mandidaber, what can we say? What can we say? How can we speak? Umat nitztadek, and how can we justify ourselves? How are we going to excuse ourselves? Right? Ha Elohim matza et avon avadecha. God has found, right, or has brought to light, that's not a literal translation, has found the iniquity of your servants. Hinenu avadim ladoni. Behold, we are servants to my Lord. We are your slaves. Gamanachnu, us, gamasher nimtzag v'yabiyado, even the one in whose hands the chalice was found. We all are. Just something interesting is happening here. Ha-Elohim Atzah. So what did he mean by this? So Rashi very helpfully gives us a deeper understanding of this. Yodim Anu, we know, Shelo Sarachnu, that we didn't do anything wrong. We know we didn't steal it. Aval me'eta makom nihaita. But this is something that happened through divine intervention. Lahavi lanuzot, to put us in this position. In other words, he's saying they are feeling so guilty about what they did to Joseph and to their father. They're feeling so bad that I feel this is what Judah's saying, that he's thinking about the fact that ultimately they are accountable. And this is the moment where they're being held accountable. And of course, what did he do? They sold Joseph into slavery. And what are they going to be? They're going to become Joseph's slaves. Of course, they don't know it's Joseph. All they know is they're going to be slaves to an Egyptian. Matzah bal, here we go. So just using an expression. Matzah bal chov, a bal chov is a creditor, right? A creditor. The creditor has found makom, a point, a place, legabot shtar chovo, to demand payment of the loan. Right? The shtar chovo literally means the contract of his loan. It's the loan has come due. Uman nitztalak. How can we justify ourselves? Lashon tzedek. So he says this. Okay, so Rashi is going to give us a long grammatical explanation here of Hebrew grammar. So nitztadak, right? So what's the root? The root is tzedek, right? Justify, just. So that's the root. And now he goes on to say, v'chein kol teva shetchilat yesoda sadi. He says any word whose first letter, the first root letter is a tzaddik. This is a tzaddik, right? Or let's find the place here, up here. It's actually, here's a tzaddik. Here's an example of a regular printed tzaddik. Another one right over there. So he says, if the root begins with the tzaddik, vehi ba'al ledaber belashon mitpael, and the form of the verb is going to be the reflexive form. Mitpael is a reflexive form. Okay. I'm trying to think. Oh, it's a lovely example. This is just a regular example. Lavash, okay, means to wear. Lavash. So to dress so lovesh means you are wearing something. If you're going to dress someone else, you use a form called the hifil, which means the causative. You cause this on someone else, lahalbish. And if you're dressing yourself, it's lehit labesh. That's the verbal form, the grammatical form. So if it's going to be in the hitpael or nitpael, this is another kind of reflexive form. It's a passive reflexive form. Noten tet. You use the letter tet. Normally, look at the see mitpael. Normally it's a taf, but in the case of a tzaddik, you use a tet here, nitztadek, right? B'makom tav, in the place of the tav. And they're both t sounds, but the tet sound is a stronger t than the tav sound. And in fact, I suspect that in earlier Hebrew, when you had a taf without a dagesh, here we go, there's the dagesh, the dot, it would have been pronounced thaf, like th, okay? That would never happen with a tet. At any rate, maybe this is too much information. The eina nitna lifnei ot. Not only that, it isn't placed before that first root letter, ot lifnei ot rishona. It's not placed, which it normally is. Here we see. So you can see pa'al is the root and mitpa'el. Do you see that the taf is placed in front of it? That's the normal way. Okay, so it isn't placed before the first letter shel yesod of the root hateva of the word, ela ba'emtza otiot, but amongst the letters ha'ikar of the root. Kagon, and he gives examples here. Nitz tadek, and the root is tzedek. So you see how the taf is placed after the first letter, just the way he said. Migzerat tzedek, from the root tzedek, justified. Here's an example. Vayitztava, right? Let it become wet. Migzerat, in other words, let it wet itself. Something like that. Migzerat tseva, right? This is from a root tseva. Normally we think of tseva, I believe, as paint, but it means to steep. In other words, to let dye get into something. And here's another example. Vayatztiru, right? Let them act as ambassadors. So in other words, let them be tzir. The word is tzir, okay, ambassadors. And vayatztiru means let them become or act as ambassadors. Migzerat tzir, from the root form tzir. And here we go. Tzir emunim, sorry, Sir Umunim. He's giving an example of faithful ambassadors. But there's the word Sir. Hatzdidenu, right? So which would mean Hatzdidenu, maybe? We took our provisions. Migzerat Tzeda Laderech. Tzeda Laderech is a word that refers to provisions. And so that's it. That's the example of where a word begins with a tzedek. But Rashi's on a roll, okay? V'teva shetechilata samach, right? Look at this. These are all sibilants, right? A tzaddik is a sibilant, a samach is a sibilant, excuse me, right? So a word that begins with a samach or shin or a sha, right? Or a sin, right? Keshehi mitpaelet, when it is in the form of reflexive, in the reflexive form. Hatav, then you don't need the tet, but you use the normal tav, but it mafredet et otiot ha'ikar. Again, it separates the letters of the root, and he gives examples, kagon, and he gives a reference here in Ecclesiastes 12. Here we go. Vayistabel hachagav, right? And the root is gzerat saval. Saval actually is a porter. Lisbol means to be loaded, something like that. And what it means is that the grasshopper drags itself heavily, drags itself, right? And then again from Daniel, and this is actually Aramaic here, I think. Mistakel, so there's Sachal, Mistakel, Havit, Bekarnaya. Havit, I was Mistakel, looking at its horns. I was thinking about its horns. Migzerat, Sachal, to consider, to think about. And I believe this is Micah, Vayishtamer. So here's the shin, the example of the shin, right? Chukot Omri. And or Yishtamar Chukot Omri. The decrees of Omri were kept. Migzerat Shamar. And that is from a root form, Shamar, to guard. And an example, look at, he's giving all these examples, right? Isaiah 59, Vesar Meira, Mishtolel or Mistolel, Migzerat. Okay, so Sar Meira, Mistolel, Sar to depart from evil, Mishtolel or Mistolel, I'm not certain of it, right, is considered a fool, is considered stupid, right? He's treated as if he himself, right? It is a reflexive sense there. And then there's migzerat, and there's another example. Look, molich yoatzim sholel. There's that word, shalal, sholel, right? So molich is to take, to carry. Yoatzim, counselors. Yoetz is a counselor. Sholel as fools, right? So again, he leads counselors away as fools. So in other words, possibly referring to God, saying here there are people who are giving good advice, or by comparison, I'm sorry, I think that what it's doing is making people who are wise compared to God are fools. And here, mistolel ba'ami, he treads down my people. Migzerat from the root form in Jeremiah 18, derech lo slula, a path not trodden down. And that is the end of Rashi for Parshat Miketz. Let's see if we can finish up the Parsha now. Vayomer, and Joseph says to them, Chalilali, God forbid. Nah, I wouldn't do such a thing. Me asot from doing such a thing. God forbid that I should do such a thing. Ha'ish asher nimtza hagviya bi'ato, the man in whose hand the chalice was found, hu yeli eved, he is going to be my slave. Vatem, as for you, halu shalom, go in peace, elavichem, to your father. There we go. They now are at this pivotal moment. And once again, the Parsha ends, right, in this moment with a cliffhanger. The previous one ended in a cliffhanger where the chief wine steward forgot about Joseph in prison. And this Parsha ends in a cliffhanger as well. So I'm going to stop the share. And this is why I think this is one of the most beautiful pieces of literature, certainly in the Bible, but period, in terms of world literature. Just amazing. Its understanding of human nature. And I think that's, of course, perhaps a defining element of good fiction, is the degree to which it leads to a deep understanding of human nature and human psychology. So, if you have some comments, I'm happy to hear them. Otherwise, we'll stop the recording and wait for next week. Okay.